Across towns and cities in England and Wales, grooming scandals still loom large. Bradford, Oldham, Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, the list goes on. And the scandals are being felt acutely in this postcode too. After months of ruling one out, the Prime Minister had a change of heart this weekend, promising the first statutory grooming inquiry over 20 years since cases were first reported.
The statement from the Home Secretary.
The U-turn driven by the findings of an explosive review from Dame Louise Casey, commissioned by the government earlier this year.
The findings of her audit are damning. At its heart, she identifies a deep-rooted failure to treat children as children. A continued failure to protect children and teenage girls from rape, from exploitation and serious violence, and from the scars that last a lifetime. She finds too much fragmentation in the authorities' response, too little sharing of information, too much reliance on flawed data, too much denial, too little justice.
The review found a collective failure to address questions about the ethnicity of grooming gangs. Nationally, only a third of abusers' ethnicity was recorded.
In the local data that the audit examined from 3 police forces, they identify clear evidence of over-representation among suspects of Asian and Pakistani heritage men. And she refers to examples of organisations avoiding the topic altogether for fear of appearing racist or raising community tensions.
The leader of the opposition called the Prime Minister a coward for waiting 4 months to launch a national inquiry.
The Prime Minister's handling of this scandal is an extraordinary failure of leadership. His judgment has once again been found wanting. Since he became Prime Minister, he and the Home Secretary dismissed calls for an inquiry because they did not want to cause a stir. They accused those of us demanding justice for the victims of this scandal as, and I quote, jumping on a far-right bandwagon. Yes.
At the heart of it all are stories like Gemma's, who was groomed and raped as a teenager in Rochdale while living in care. She's waiving her anonymity to speak with us.
I was 14, going on 15, when it was all happening. Obviously, it just started off with going and out with friends and meeting older men. I never thought it'd turn out for me to end up getting abused by strange men that I didn't know.
Survivors are split on a new inquiry, but Gemma thinks it's pointless when recommendations from the Child Sexual Exploitation Inquiry that concluded in 2022 are taking so long to implement.
I understand other victims want justice and they want hope, and I hope that for them they get whatever they're looking for. But me personally, I don't think another inquiry would benefit anyone when they spend millions of pounds and don't take the recommendation seriously.
In her review, Baroness Louise Casey said to prevent this abuse, we must first understand it, and to date, we have failed in that duty. But she has other criticisms of those in power too. Is the politics behind this unhelpful?
Yes, the politics behind this is unhelpful. I find it very hard because I think it was absolutely right that the Prime Minister got a grip of this. I actually think he couldn't have announced on just because people are shouting that they want a national inquiry all of a sudden. You can't then say, I tell you what, we'll spend 10 years on a multi-million-pound national inquiry, when actually I might have found that we needed to do the criminal investigation and nothing else. When the Home Secretary said, I'm apologising for what happened, I was disappointed that the opposition of the day couldn't dig deep and join in that apology.
If the government thought agreeing to a statutory inquiry would take the heat out of this debate, it hasn't. But at the very least, it's given some survivors hope that they might finally get justice.
Well, just before we came on air, I spoke to the Minister for Safeguarding, Jess Phillips. Jess Phillips, with the benefit of hindsight, was it a mistake to describe people who were calling for a national inquiry as jumping on a far-right bandwagon?
Look, I didn't say anything of the sort. Well, I think what you're referring to is the Prime Minister suggesting that Conservative politicians, one of whom, so Kemi Badenoch, had been under the last decade, she was the Children's Minister and the Equalities Minister, and the Shadow Home Secretary, who was a Policing Minister and had never mentioned the issue of grooming gangs at all when they had the power to do anything about it.
Do you still think they're jumping on a far-right bandwagon?
I think that if they'd cared, they would have done something when Telford came to them and asked for a national inquiry. They said no. I think if they'd cared, that they would have made the ethnicity data, which is still utterly woeful, even though in Alexis Jay's review into grooming gangs, which led to a 200-page document, it said that the collection of ethnicity data was bad. It is still bad.
You seem to interchange the use of Asian, Pakistani and Muslim at different times in this report, and that's very problematic for a lot of people. Asia stretches from China and Japan to Afghanistan and parts of Turkey.
Of course, but I think that that probably speaks to how poorly that data is collected. I think that that is one of the problems, is that the categorisations, as you will know, as people who we all fill in forms, don't we, are often very broad brush.
So what ethnicity data will now be collected? I mean, will you just be categorising people as Asian?
No. So look, I'm not going to. We have to mandate this. It will have to be done through consultation with the police.
Well, most people in the general public would be surprised what people's origin is. You know, and if it's Pakistani, say it's Pakistani. If it's Indonesian, say it's whatever. Is that what you're going to do?
Look, I'm not going to preempt those conversations. This is a report we received a week ago, because it's very easy just for me to sit here and say, do you know how complex police databases are? What I don't want to do is lie to you.
But at the moment, the Home Secretary slurred the whole continent.
No, the Home Secretary did not do that. What she talked about was the data that already exists within the police forces that Louise Casey looked into.
Well, does the data say there is a disproportionate number of Chinese people who are in child grooming gangs, for example?
No, the data does not say that.
Well, then why did she say there is a disproportionate number of Asians?
Because, as I've just said, there is a problem with the way that the data is collected. Do you know what? I think that language is really important, and I've worked in this field for many, many, many years, and I have seen hundreds of cases over the years of people groomed by people with British Pakistani background. And actually, I think that it's really important that we say that. For too long, an obsession with the idea of feeling as if we couldn't say those things has led to failures.
Yeah. It is still hard to see how this would have happened if it wasn't for Elon Musk's attacks on social media, isn't it?
The idea that this is down to Elon Musk is, I'm going to say, an insult to the victims and the people who work with victims who have campaigned.
But you weren't planning an inquiry back at Christmas, were you?
Of course I was. I've dedicated my entire life's work to it. I wasn't going to find myself in office and just go, oh, forget that.
Jess Phillips, thank you very much.